Welcome to episode 3 and the conclusion of the search for Melody Bannister and her 4 children. This all started when Melody Bannister became convinced her children, especially her eldest Genevieve, were victims of horrific satanic sexual abuse at the hands of her father-in-law and with the help of her husband, Bill Bannister. Fearing for the safety of her children, Melody reported what had happened to the Stafford County Sheriff's Office in Virginia. However, unsatisfied with their reaction, Melody took the kids and disappeared. After the police concluded a child sex abuse investigation, they determined that the allegations were unfounded. Bill Bannister petitioned the courts for custody of his children, and they granted it to him, but Melody Bannister refused to bring them home. Eventually, the Marshals service was called in to find the missing children. Due to discoveries made during the course of the pursuit, the Marshals made the determination that the children could be in grave danger. We join the story as Senior Inspector Tommy O'Brien of the Marshal Service continues his hunt for the Bannisters. I'm also joined by Genevieve Bannister, Bill Bannister, Detective Jamie Wright of the Stafford County Sheriff's Office, and Jim Hinton, a victim's advocate. I'm Chris Gotzik, and this is Chasing Evil. So, Tommy, you continue to investigate every individual, both Melody and anyone you can identify who was supporting her on the run. And while you're exploring Melody's social media footprint, you discover a potential lead.
She talked a lot, just like Bill said, about this courage conference. So based on everything that I did, I went to my boss and I said, I need to go down to this courage conference, and I'm going to tell you straight up right now, she's not going to be there while she's on the run with the kids, but it's going to help me tremendously with the case.
So what is the Courage Conference?
The Courage Conference is put on by Ashley and Will Easter. They're victims advocates who are pretty well respected. Basically, it's an opportunity for other advocates to come together and to provide training and share their stories of how they got into abuse prevention.
And how big is it? How many people usually attend?
Probably just under 200 people who attended.
So I'm in the Courage just watching them come in on Friday and Saturday. Friday night, they had the pre-registration on the second floor. So I identified an individual who was very close to one of the leaders in this Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. So I just watched the pre-registration. Not many people did it on Friday night. The lobby bar just went there, and I just started talking to everybody. They didn't know who I was. I said, yeah, I missed my flight. Just what is this about? Getting a conversation with them. And what I was doing there is pre-planning a future interview with that individual. So I'm reading all these individuals. I'm seeing what their status is. When they're in the lobby bar, who's going to who are the important people there.
Right. And so you're establishing their associates and friends by watching their interactions.
100%.
Uh-huh.
And then some blogs started coming in with other people. And certain blogs I liked a lot that I think if I approach these individuals, I think they're going to be able to assist me. But how am I going to have them assist me?
And the Underground Railroad is a way for a group to move around people who are escaping an abusive environment. So sounds like a good thing.
Yes.
That's the appeal to it.
Right.
It sounds like a good thing. And so many innocent people get roped into it because it's almost a romantic idea of helping people who law enforcement either refuses to or is incompetent to help. And so the Underground Railroad, people want to become a part of it because it's a heroic way for ordinary people to help people in extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
So when I started working with the individuals on the task force in the District of Alabama, they did their own investigation. We got locations where the kids and Melody they were registered at a Christian school down there. And then also the individuals that came up specifically that was assisting them in dealing with Melody.
So by following this trail, you're pretty sure this is the people that have Melody somewhere.
We're on the right track now.
Right.
We are on the right track.
Did you approach them? Did they want to be helpful to law enforcement?
No, I was never going to approach them. Based on my investigation, going to the Courage Conference, they are definitely the ones I'm staying away from.
Mm-hmm.
So during the case, we had like several places that we knew. We knew about Texas prior. We knew about Alabama. Bill gave me a list of individuals, gave me a list of locations, advised me of the court date in Alabama.
Right.
So now we knew we had the court date. I got that afterwards, though, the
Right.
intel. But it just started making sense in reference to now that court case didn't work out the way they wanted it to. So we knew they were leaving.
Right. Then you made the decision to bring this case to the public and go on live PD.
Usually I don't like going to the media until it's the very, very end of a case. If we have nothing or we want to shake the tree, we want to get them uncomfortable again.
Okay, so you're on live PD. Does that generate tips for you on her location? Anything that's worthwhile, or do you get her and the kids in a small boat on Gilligan's Island? I mean, because I know there are crazy tips, and then there are those tips that are actually actionable.
You're going to get tips, like you said, that's going to be way out of there.
Right.
You're going to get some legit ones. You're going to get some that, okay, yeah, they were in that area months ago, but you're also going to get, like, if you're working a fugitive case, you might have a family member, an associate, or even the fugitive himself call and say he was in California 100% and give like a specific about it to get us off track. So you got to take that into consideration. One of the individuals I reached out to was to Jim based on reading about him, knowing the book, the situation with his family.
So, Jim, you get a call from the U.S. Marshals.
It was really interesting because, as I mentioned before, I was suspicious of this story to begin with. So I had actually seen Melody on live PD right about the time that Tom had called me. And so Tom called me and he said, "Do you know anything about Melody Bannister and that she's on the run?" And I said, I don't know a whole lot, but I said, this may or may not be helpful. But I did speak to her the day before she fled, and I tried to convince her not to flee. And I told her that it wasn't going to end well if she did that. And I said so many parts of her story were not believable. So I explained to him what I meant by that. He said, "I'm going to ask you straight up. You think you know who's behind hiding her?" He said, "Because I can tell you it's a very intricate group." I didn't even hesitate. I said, I can almost stake my life on it that it's, and I'll never forget Tom. Tom said, "Holy crap." He said, how do you know that? And I said, well, the day after Melody and the kids fled, I got a message on Facebook from a private message, and I actually pulled it up here, and it just, it has red flags all over the place. So she said, "Hi, Jimmy, and thanks for sharing. A friend of mine, Melody Bannister, has told me you're familiar with satanic ritual abuse, which is excellent news. I have so many SRA survivors coming to me for prayer ministry, it's nearly overwhelming. I'm thankful to hear that you know it's true. Do you have SRA survivors coming to you asking for help? I'm just always thankful when I meet a fellow advocate who understands the prevalence and depth of it. I've been studying and praying since the Lord is sending me several of them in prayer ministry. I'm currently working with, I think, 7 who had memories of SRA spontaneously come back to them. I want so much for the church at large to be aware of this, but for the most part, people believe it isn't real. It can't possibly happen. The willful blindness is astounding." And I thought, one, the timing of her reaching out to me the day after Melody fled, or actually the day she fled, I thought that was a little bit too ironic. The other thing, I can tell when people are manipulating me. You know, my dad is one of the most sophisticated sex offenders in all of Pennsylvania's prisons. And I can spot manipulation a mile away, and this absolutely reeks of manipulation. And she's trying to get information, asking me if I have SRA survivors, asking me for help. You know, it's what I call information mining.
Right.
And she's trying to gain access to those victims. And so she just seemed like a very likely candidate. And the other thing that was a huge red flag is she said that she's overwhelmed by the number of satanic ritual abuse survivors who are coming to her. That's just, I mean, I've been doing advocacy for over a decade. I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of survivors that I've come into contact with. The only victims or alleged victims of satanic ritual abuse who've contacted me have been directly tied to. So I thought there's, for her to say that she's overwhelmed by this huge group of satanic ritual abuse survivors who are coming to her, it just seemed, everything seemed really off. And she's very intelligent. She's very well respected within the advocacy community. So she just seemed like the most likely candidate. And so when I said that to Tom, he said, "You're exactly right." And he said, we have mountains of evidence that shows that she's directly involved in hiding Melody and her kids.
Right.
And he said, "Do you think that you'd be able to get close to her?" And I said, "It's it's going to be pretty tricky because she's extremely guarded, and all of her communication is on the Wicker app. And everybody goes by aliases. So I said, it's going to take time, but I think I can get in."
Genevieve, you're on the run. You're moving around quite a bit. What kinds of people are you staying with? What kinds of people are you encountering?
Well, I actually saw her house. She took me to her house once, and I saw I'm trying to say this right, but she had talked to Mom about staying at her house, but there was already another victim, alleged victim, staying at her house, and I saw her briefly, but I just thought it was interesting being able to like see her house, and now learning that she's like this penultimate, plotter, I guess. But there were all kinds of people. We stayed at house too. We were actually all in one room, which was super fun.
Yeah.
And he arranged for us to stay at, I think they were a part of his church or something, this couple who had 4 boys, I believe. They were all pretty young. The oldest one was, I think, Peter's age. Yes, the reason that we had to stay at their house was because 2 grandsons were coming to stay at their house, so we had to leave their house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was Alabama, and actually the court case when my dad had to drive down there and they were holding it, we were in the cars just outside of the parking lot. We weren't even in the parking lot. There was like some crusty, abandoned, haunted-looking building that was like just next to the courthouse, which is, I will never get over the irony of my mom accusing, my grandfather of incest, and then of all the places to go to file a court case, she goes to Birmingham, Alabama. Like, I will never get over that.
Okay, not for nothing, but I was born in Birmingham, Alabama.
Look, there's no shame in that. I'm just saying.
I didn't experience any until just this very moment. But okay.
I'm just saying the internet memes would have gone absolutely wild.
Yes. Okay.
Alabama is the butt of some of those jokes.
But we were in the parking lot of that building. We were in 2 separate cars. My mom wasn't driving at that time. I believe I was in the car with him, and I don't remember who the other driver was, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But we were sitting there, and as soon as we got word, I mean, it happened pretty quick, that they were just not taking the case. They were like, we don't have jurisdiction for this. This is a Virginia case, and they're supposed to go to their father, so they have to go to their father. We were out of there immediately.
Right.
But
when you heard that, did you say anything to your mother? Like, hey, I want to go back to Dad.
At that point, the fear had kind of set in of,
So you knew you were supposed to go back to your dad's, but your mindset had changed a little bit.
I mean, I remember my psychology teacher saying on like the first day of class that like if given enough time, I could convince you guys to believe anything.
Right.
And when she said that, I was like, I know it's true because, I think we want to believe the people that we trust and care about.
Right. And even though you have been at odds with your mother on several things, she was still somebody you trusted and cared about.
Yeah, and I think it was a better safe than sorry mentality of like, what if it is true? And, what if we do go back and it is hell on earth? Like, what if I didn't remember or there wasn't really anything bad before, but we go back and now it's like tenfold? Because that's what she had talked to us about. She had said like over and over again that that's what we would face and that the cops didn't care about us and that they would... that they were in on it and that they had hurt us too. And of course I was like, I've never seen these men in my life, but okay.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was a accusation that came out later, was that Jamie White was involved and the sheriff of Stafford County was involved.
Yeah, it definitely started to escalate.
Okay.
But I remember when we were pulling out there, I was like, well, this is why we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. Because I remember when she got that protective order, she was so happy. I remember we were sitting in the courthouse parking lot, like on the side, like in some of the grass, like you know, the little medians or whatever. And she was like clutching it to her chest, and she was so relieved. And she said, like, thank Jesus, thank Jesus. And she let me see it, and I read it over, and I was like, this only protects us until the court date, Mom. Like, it's for 2 weeks. Okay. If like there were really such horrific abusers, this is a piece of paper. It's not going to stop anything.
Okay.
That's what I remember thinking. And when we were pulling out of that parking lot, I was like, well, you know, I kind of expected this. And we went straight to South Carolina to house, which was quite the episode.
Okay. We're going to get to house. But you start to want to believe the person you trust and care about, your mother, and you're believing perhaps that if you go back home, that's going to be a really bad situation. But it went further than that. There was almost a sense of paranoia that started to sink in.
I think it was, I didn't want to disbelieve my siblings because they were so upset about it. They were convincing, really. I mean, in the sense that like their being upset was convincing, not what they were saying was convincing. Like if someone else had said that to me, I'd be like, get out of here, you are talking nonsense. But it was my siblings, and they were upset, they were crying, they were, you know, Janelle would start shaking sometimes, and she was like saying how like deeply afraid she was of ever seeing Dad again. And it was that I wanted to make sure they were safe and that they weren't going to get hurt. And I viewed that as, you know, that there was no immediate danger in the sense that we weren't being whipped here. So it was not that we'd been whipped, you know, at our house, but, you know.
So how would you describe that increased sense of paranoia on your part?
It was every person you looked at. We weren't allowed to go out anymore. We couldn't go to the grocery store. We couldn't. This increased as time went on, but we couldn't go out for walks anymore, or, you know, we had to. I mean, this was after house, so, but.
So you go to this house of this woman named. Paranoia starts to get the best of you because the person who's now you're supposed to be safe at this house, you start looking at her potentially differently.
I never liked her, to be honest. I know that's kind of a bold thing to say, but she was like an odd personality. I don't know. And I was like, this is the person we're fleeing to safety. Like that was like, this is why I was like never fully convinced that like any of this was legitimate, because I was like, if this was really an emergency, if we were really facing, you know, this whole ring of abusers, like we're going to this person who's of questionable sanity, like no offense, but some of the things that she did, I remember, now I didn't witness this. This is according to my mother, so it should be taken with a grain of salt.
Okay.
But had purchased bacon, right? Like raw bacon that, you know, you would cook.
Right.
And Mom was going to cook it, and, you know, just to set the story straight, you know, if someone's cooking bacon in the house, everyone in the house knows that you're cooking bacon. Like, you can hear it, you smell it, you know when bacon's being cooked.
You do.
And Mom pulled out the package from the fridge, and there was portions missing. Like, of raw bacon, portions were missing from the package, and she was like, this was not cooked, because she was the only one who was cooking. No one else, you know, really cooked in the house. Other than me, I would make spaghetti at midnight, but that wasn't, you know, you know, that wasn't bacon. And she was like, what was this? And she asked every single one of us kids, because it was just us and then in the house. So no one else would have touched the bacon. And Mom was like, I think I ate raw bacon. And like, there was one time my mom was like making chicken and like got upset with her because she was like, no, you're cooking it too much. And it was just weird, ridiculous things like that was like, what?
165 degrees and not one less. That's chicken.
Yeah, it was interesting. And like she would like yell at us sometimes, and then it was so funny, she called family meetings when she wanted to talk to us about like who knows what. Honestly, I was not paying attention to that woman, because I was, you know, pretty out of it. I was pretty grumpy at everyone. I was not having it. but she called them family meetings, and she would have us all come together to like talk about like, I don't know, how they were going to try to contact the FBI or whatever. And of course I'm listening to this like, I'm sure they're real convinced of all this. But,
right. So you're still a little bit cynical, but it got to a point, and this, really got me, and I never forgot when you told me that.
It was in Kentucky. We just became so isolated, and we hadn't left the house. We were staying at a little farmhouse, and like even when we were like just going outside and walking around in like the pasture, I guess, because there were cows that would come through sometimes. Like if we heard a commercial plane go overhead, like we would like duck and cover and hide under trees, or like run inside, or there's like this rickety old barn, we would run in there and hide in there.
Because
there was a paranoia that we were being watched. Like the commercial jets that were going overhead would somehow be able to see us, and then we'd be caught or something like that. And then later when we were in Missouri, we were later told that there were like farmers who had like helicopters, and they would like fly them over the river because the house that we were in was right next to the river. And when we heard like helicopters going over, like we all freaked out. Like it was crazy, where we would go and hide under the bed because we didn't want to be seen by the helicopters. Like it was, it was.
But on the one hand, you were still maintained a healthy bit of cynicism. But on the other hand, you were hiding from commercial jets that were going over 30,000 feet. Why do you think I don't want to say bought into it, but why do you think you were convinced that was probably a reality?
I don't know if I really ever accepted it as reality, and I viewed it as two separate worlds, I think. I think the time that I spent with like my mother and my siblings, like on the trip, as we call it, it became a whole separate world. It was like living in this weird bubble that wasn't a part of this world anymore. And then the rest of the world was separate. And so I viewed it as the reality I was being faced with, but not reality, as part of the reality that everyone else was experiencing. It was a reality that I was experiencing, but I knew it wasn't necessarily real, in the sense that like I believed everything that was being said, because I just didn't know what to do. I was stuck here regardless. I was being told this stuff regardless. I couldn't get her to shut up for the life of me. Like that was constant. And so it wasn't necessarily that in my own mind, in my own world, that I was like, yes, this is true. But I was constantly grappling with, is it not? In my own world, but in the outside, I had to react. Like that was, my siblings were scared too. I had to find safe cover for them, or it was my duty to react that way to my mom, to hide. Otherwise, we would be caught. And
along those lines, you also told me something that was horrific and a potential eventuality, you thought. And you had said to me, I think it just occurred to you, so I won't even introduce it, because it's like I don't want to lead you. This was something that I found hard to cope with.
I think towards the end, at the very last house that we stayed at, which was on the river in Missouri, I felt empty. I really did. I feel like my life was gone and I would no longer get it back. All my friends were gone. My school was gone. My cousins, my family, they were all gone. I remember realizing that to an extent. I actually confronted my mom. I was like, I want to go back home. I want to go to school. I want to see my friends. And you ruined that, because I can't go back now. The things that you've accused these people of is horrific. Like, I can never show my face like in my hometown ever again because of what you did. And obviously, that wound up not being true.
Right.
But that's how I felt. And I remember like, I don't understand. Like, why did you do this? And she actually got very upset with me. And she was like, you're a whore. And I was like, what?
Oh.
Yeah, I was floored. I could not believe what she was saying. I was like, what? And she was like, you liked being abused. You liked being abused by your grandfather. And that's why you're mad at me. You're mad at me because they taught you to be angry with me. They manipulated you into it, and you liked being abused. You want to go back there so you can be abused again. And I was like, I just couldn't even fathom it. It was like astounding to me. I was like, you're actually saying this to me? You know me. I am your daughter. You gave birth to me, and you're saying this to my face, and you believe it. Like, that was the thing that I was like she wasn't it was just the two of us in the garage talking about this. Like,
Right.
there was no one to perform for. There was no one to lie to. She was saying it to me, and I could not believe it. I was like, you really view me this way. You really think of me this way. Like, I was horrified. I would later fully come to terms with this in the house in Missouri. I remember sitting in the living room on the floor and looking over to her while she was writing her book, actually. And I just looked at her and I was like, that's not my mom anymore. Because she didn't know me as, like, her daughter anymore. She viewed me, I think, as a piece in her story, as a person to manipulate into doing what she wanted. And because I was uncooperative, I was useless. And obviously that kind of reflected into my own inner thoughts, as I was like, I am worthless. My life is gone. I'm empty. There's nothing left for me here. And so I remember, I think a cop had pulled up and, like, knocked on the door of the house that we were staying at, and, like, we all freaked out, and she was like, quickly into the bathroom, because there was no windows in the bathroom,
Right.
and it was the most interior part of the house.
Right.
And so she had taken us into there, and she was like, you know, like, we can't be taken by the cops. We can't, like, what will happen to you is so much worse than what happened to you before, which was already, you know, ridiculous. And she was like, you know, we need to get cyanide pills. And if I had them right now, I would give them to you. And I remember thinking, like, she would actually give us cyanide pills to kill ourselves. Like, she would actually have us kill ourselves. And, like, obviously that was, like, mind-blowing to think that, you know, your own mother would be willing to have you kill yourself. Like, obviously that's the last thing a mother would want you to do, is to end your own life,
Right.
especially because, you know, it's almost like it came full circle. The whole, you know, the beginning of her paranoia was the fact that I was self-harming, was the fact that I didn't like myself, that I didn't want to live anymore. And now here she is. She would have me kill myself. And I remember thinking, if she did give me that pill, I would just take it. I just would. There was no reason for me to fight at that point. It would be over. I would have taken it without hesitating. I wouldn't have questioned her. I wouldn't have said anything. I would have just popped it into my mouth. So it did reach that point, and it, you know, coming back into the world of the living, because that's how it felt, to be back with, like, my family and everything again. Like, I remember having to, like, untangle that and, like, being like, no, your life is worth living.
Yeah.
And it's been tough.
Right.
It's been you know, some people, you know, make out coming out of abuse as, oh, we're free now, yeah, woohoo, it's great. It was, I don't know.
It's hard to untangle.
Mm-hmm. And there were no answers.
Right.
There was no way for me to be like, what is the word? When, like,
Closure?
There was no closure.
Right.
I just had to, like, pick myself back up again, and it took forever.
Right. And
So-
hoping that this was gonna, you know, that this ordeal will be over at some point soon. Not ending like that.
Yeah.
So
I remember telling my cousin we went to an all you can eat buffet, like the Wood Grill or whatever. And I remember sitting there talking to her, and I remember saying to her, I was like, I feel like before all this stuff, like, you know, our house was like a dollhouse. Like, you have all the little people, you have the perfect little nuclear family. It's all
Right.
set up cute. It's painted colorful, and everything's where it's supposed to be. And, you know, obviously it wasn't perfect, but I felt like what had happened was someone had just, like, picked up the dollhouse and hurled it down the stairs.
right.
And then, like, now I'm back in the dollhouse, but nothing's where it should be, and everything's missing and in disarray, and I'm being told, well, you're back in the dollhouse, you're back in reality, and everything's okay now. It wasn't. And so I think one of the biggest things that I can say from my experience is that it was not about us. Our best interests were not in anyone's heart. They simply weren't. And people can, kind of convince themselves, to be free of their own guilt that it was for us. It was to save us from abuse.
Right.
It wasn't. Because the amount of guilt and shame that all me and my siblings have still carry.
Right.
The amount of, I remember when we were first back, I couldn't look in the mirror. I was so scared that someone was staring back at me, watching me in the mirror. I didn't even want to shower. I didn't want to take my clothes off because I was like, someone's watching me. And, being called a whore did not help. I was like, can't even take off my clothes now to shower.
Right.
And, I know my siblings still struggle with it. And, it's easy to convince yourself that you're a savior. It's easy to convince yourself that you're helping somebody in that group. And I don't know about other cases. I can't speak on that. But I know in our case, the abuse was happening there, right in front of everyone's faces, and they were calling it being saved. And it was a lie. It was. And I think that's important to say is that, if anyone's still questioning what happened, the truth is that we were being abused by that system, by, the people involved in that Underground Railroad. I don't know about everybody, but the people that we came in contact with. And I think the biggest thing is to understand that people will lie to you. They will manipulate you, especially when you're close to them.
Yeah.
And I think with this whole case, I think that's a reality people need to hear and understand is that, sometimes you love a person so much you're willing to accept the worst possible reality that you're ever going to experience for them. And sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes you have to say, no, you're lying to me. I know you're lying to me.
Right.
And obviously we didn't have that choice, but there's some people who do have a choice in this. And I think it's important to stop this kind of abuse, because it's a different kind of abuse. It's a weird, fickle illusion that makes you feel like the abuse is needed or that it's not even abuse at all. And I think people need to understand this is a form of abuse, and this cannot happen to other people too and be called being saved. It's nothing of the sort. So, I don't know.
Okay, no, Jim, having heard what Genevieve just said, is that something that you've heard before from other victims, that kind of sharing those kinds of feelings?
100%.
Well, let's bring the Bannister kids home.
All right. Each case evolves differently.
Right.
Specifically in this case, most of our information, our intel, came from a vast network of confidential informants.
All right, let's talk about confidential informants for a minute. How do you motivate them to give you information?
So there's many ways to develop an informant.
Okay.
It's actually an art to develop an informant.
By reputation, just to interrupt, that is something you are known for. That's a specialty of yours, is developing confidential informants.
Yes, it is. I'm known for that on many cases, many different types of cases.
Right.
But that's the avenue I like to work because you're gathering intel from basically inside of the case.
Okay. So what's in it for them?
It could be money.
Okay.
If it could be they realized that what they were told in reference to the crime committed, that they were lied to.
Right.
It could be that they assisted the fugitive at the beginning. It didn't realize that they were assisting him going on the run, but now they're involved with the case, and that's also would let somebody give us intel.
And in this particular case, there was kind of this groundswell of support for Melody Bannister. There was a petition online, I think, that had something like 40,000 signatures of support for her going on the run and protecting her kids from her husband and grandfather and from the police in Stafford, yes?
Yeah, that is correct. It was a wow factor with us for how many people were involved and how many people supported Melody.
Right.
But when I started looking into this case and I went down to that Courage conference and interacting with these individuals who had no idea who I was, I realized there were some really good people in this group that didn't realize what was going on. What I was able, specifically on this case, and to include other cases, that it was all a bunch of lies.
Right.
For example, I was able to show these individuals 2 different police reports.
Okay, and what'd they claim?
They were claiming that their kids were subjected to satanic ritual abuse.
Okay.
One report was Melanie's.
Right.
The other report was someone else's from a totally different state.
Both making the same heinous accusations?
Almost verbatim. It was obvious these people were being coached
Right.
by some organization.
Right. Same organization, two horrific claims. What are the odds of that?
Correct.
Right. Not going to happen.
Correct. So I had another informant, and talking to this individual for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks and building rapport with that individual,
Right.
giving certain part of the case in reference to why Melody went on the run, I was able to convince this individual
Right.
to give me proof that Melody pre-planned this months before with this organization.
Oh, okay. So that was very helpful. So how did having this vast network of confidential informants translate into finding the Bannister kids?
So working with these informants, I was able to grab like a piece of the puzzle from each of them. While I'm grabbing and putting this picture together, I'm also working with the specialty units from United States Marshals Service that's assisting me. We were able to pinpoint a location, a Walmart in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay. And this is the first time that you're actually been able to get this specific information. like
Correct.
this. Okay.
I flew into Indianapolis.
Uh-huh.
I met up with the team that was conducting surveillance. After many hours, we didn't think this was going to go through.
Right.
Approximately 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, we had a vehicle pull up along the woods behind the Walmart.
Uh-huh.
At that time, we had 4 or 5 silhouettes come out of the woods, jump into the vehicle. At that time, we didn't know who they were. We were pretty confident we're good. We're good.
Right.
So we have to confirm that. So during a loose surveillance, they went into a Raceway gas station, pull up to get gas. We had an undercover United States Marshal Service employee go there, confirm that it was the 4 Bannister kids that were in the back seat and Melody Bannister that was in the front passenger seat.
So it's about to go down.
It's about to go down.
Okay.
And we didn't know the conditions of the kids, and we knew the takedown was going to be aggressive because of intel that we received.
Right.
So we
Where
had
the kids might be in grave danger.
grave danger.
Right.
So a little further away, we had the ambulance, the fire department, and local police department staged to assist us after the takedown.
Okay.
For the kids.
Right.
So at that time, we did a vehicle pin. We had to break some windows to methodically and quickly get Melody into custody, and then we took the kids and walked them inside, and then we had the other units that were staged come to the scene, and then we had them look at the children.
Okay. Genevieve, you're getting gas.
Yes.
What happens?
Well, we were convinced at this point in time that the single worst possible thing that could ever happen to us at this point was being found by the police.
Okay.
Like, that was like the penultimate worst nightmare of our mother, basically, which of course fed off into us children.
Right.
And I remember sitting in the car and then seeing the red and blue lights flashing around, and I suddenly, like, I just fell through the floor of my own reality, and I was just floating in a void. I just kind of went numb, and then I watched as the gun, like, they used the guns to break the windows. I never knew that was a thing, but that's what they did. And they
the way they swarmed must have confirmed all of your worst fears.
It was like in an instant. I was honestly kind of impressed. That was so fast. I was like, oh my god, they must have just zoom. And they actually hit my window because I was on the side, if that makes sense, in the passenger part of the car. But it didn't break. But my mom's broke, and I remember watching the gun like hit the window, and then they took us out, and I just like got out very like.
But how did they take your mom out?
Oh, it was it was a show for sure. I remember them. They took her down onto the concrete. I remember looking down, and they had her like, the way you see people getting arrested, but they're on their stomach. Her hands were behind her back. They were handcuffing her. They weren't being aggressive when I like looked. And she was like, oh my God, like Jesus help me. Like, she was screaming, she was crying. She was pretty hysterical. And I remember just like watching it in horror, like just numb horror. What was I gonna do? Yes, I'm gonna fist fight these guys. Totally. That's gonna end well.
By the way, not for nothing. I think you take O'Brien in 2 rounds.
No, I remember when we were in the actual grocery part of it looking at him like, this guy is huge. There was no way I was going to be aggressive with this man. Not physically, at least. Apparently, I was very verbal, which, surprise, surprise. Yeah, and the guy who was handcuffing her was like, you're fine, you're okay, like, you know, basically, you're being dramatic.
Right.
And she was, I think, but, you know, I mean, the shock of it happened so fast. And I remember, like, standing out in the gas station, and I was, like, shaking. And it was cold, but I, like, kind of realized that I wasn't shaking from the cold. I was just shaking. And I was like, I need to lock my knees. I cannot be seen, like, shaking out here. That is so embarrassing. And they took us into the, I guess, like, the convenience store part of the gas station. And I was like standing there. I was talking to them. I was so stupid, bro. We had been given alias names, of course, and my alias name, quote unquote, was Holly for whatever reason. And I remember they asked like for our names, and my siblings all told the truth, but I just lied out of instinct. I guess it was like so in the shock of the moment. I guess,
and it was also so ingrained in you.
Yeah, I was so conditioned to like respond and act a certain way that I just did it on instinct. Now looking back, I'm like, why did I even lie about that? My siblings told us the truth. They knew who we were, and here I was lying. Like, they knew damn well who I was. Me lying about my name is not helpful, but whatever.
You're not getting anything out of me, Kappas.
Yeah, totally.
So actually during that time, so it was we have devices that looks like when they come with they have devices that break windows. So, but it happened so quick, you know what I mean? But we were in there talking, and you know, because of everything that happened to you, and we all understood because we're like, yeah, we understand. And she was like telling her siblings, don't talk to us, this and that. And then the youngest daughter, I believe it was, wanted her blankie.
Oh, it was me.
Was that you?
Yes, it was me.
Okay. So we went and got her blanket. Like maybe they'll talk to us, and no, she still didn't talk to us.
I wanted my blanket back. I was not about to leave blanket. I still have him. I'm like, he's mine. Will not be parted.
And I do remember after, like when you saw Tommy much later, you didn't understand why they were so, because that's for a parental abduction, that's a lot. And he explained to you that they feared for your safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think I was talking to two of them. I have no idea who they were. I mean, I was talking to Tommy too. Apparently, I was being very mouthy. I'm not surprised. I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure.
By the way, you were in good company.
But I remember there were these two guys, and I remember looking into their eyes, and they seemed so tired. Like, their eyes just looked so sleepy. And one of them, like, got coffee as soon as we were in there. He got himself a styrofoam cup of coffee. Now I very much relate. I didn't drink coffee at the time, but now I'm like, that is understandable.
Right.
And I remember kind of feeling bad for them. I was like, they're out so late, and they're dealing with us shitheads over here, like, mouthing off, being difficult for no reason. Like, I guess, like, in the back of my mind, I kind of knew, like, we're safe now. There's no, but, you know, that paranoia was so, like, consuming.
How long did it take you to feel safe? Because you were like, look, the worst thing that could happen is for them to show up, and they did so fairly aggressively. Mm-hmm. So how long did that transition take? Okay, now I'm safe. Now we're going back to our dad. Is that okay?
When we knew that we were going back to our dad, we threatened to kill ourselves. So, you know, class A behavior right there.
Okay.
But, it was slowly over time. I think it was like one piece at a time, realizing, no, I'm safe in this situation. This person is safe. Like, you know, different aspects of the paranoia that had set in began to ebb away. It honestly took longer than, I guess, maybe, you know, if I hadn't gone through this and I would, like, think, oh, how long would it take to get over, like, such paranoia? Like, I wouldn't guess as long as it did.
Right.
So, I don't know. I guess it was just, like, realizing that there was no evidence, really. Seeing that there was no signs that we were, like, I mean, we were being watched before, but no signs that we were, like, being watched, like, in a sense of malicious intent, and that we were safe. Like, it just, you know, it takes.
But you, on the one hand, you wanted to go back initially when this happened, like, get me back to my dad.
Yeah.
And then you had been through this conditioning and this brainwashing that, no, he's an evil man. and then you started to believe it a little bit, and now you're back with him. And did you have to process that, or did that ebb away pretty quickly to what was that your state of normal before this ordeal?
So after me and Janelle had threatened to kill ourselves,
Right.
we said that to CPS, and I don't know if it's by law or by their obligation, but they had to take us to a mental institution to just be evaluated, like interviewed to see if like we really were going to.
And fair enough, by the way.
Yeah, they weren't totally wrong, unfortunately.
Right.
And so after that, we saw our dad for the first time, and I was like, damn, I think he lost weight. That was the first thing I thought. And then we were joking about me taking off my shoes and throwing them at him as if that would have done anything.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it was, we really bonded. I think I valued my relationship to my sister more in that moment. I wanted to be close to her because we'd never had that before. I mean, before all this, we were constantly at each other's throats. We were not allowed to be in the same room together because someone would have come out bleeding. But it was the good that came out of it. And so, when my dad was the one who drove us back to Virginia, and we sat in the car in the back seat, we had invented like sign language to communicate to each other, like these stupid signs to like communicate so people wouldn't know what we were saying. We were quite creative because we had nothing else to do. Like we didn't have TV sometimes, and like we didn't have food sometimes. Like it was we would go weeks without barely any food. Like there's a reason I made spaghetti at midnight all the time because that was pretty much the only thing there was to eat.
Check. Just for that. During this investigation, there was a lot of money being moved from day one the whole time, and we were all wondering, is it actually going to the Bannister family? And listening to this is just...
So there were people raising money on behalf of Melody and the kids.
Based on what we were hearing, correct, yes.
Right. And I knew that was true, too, because she would show us, like, petitions or whatever that were being signed. The only money I ever saw was like $500 that was like set in cash. And interestingly enough, it was in, so at the time of the takedown, they obviously went through the couple bags that we'd had with us. And my mom had that money and her flash drive for her book and her evidence in like a bag that they just mistakenly put into my like little blue bag. Like they just shoved it in there. And I was like, okay. And I actually later used the money to go shopping.
Fair enough.
News to me.
But just to get back to that takedown too, when I was leaving Nashville, I called Jamie Wright because I wanted him there because he was the original detective. So Jamie came out there too, and that's when we met with the Indianapolis deputies and the other state and local PD. They were all fantastic. And then we had the ambulance there, as you saw. They came eventually from somewhere because we didn't know where you guys were going to stop. And then we had Child Protective Service, all that. But the first person I called was Bill. And I said, I'm going to call you back because I got too much going on. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was like 15, 20 minutes later. I told him where we were. He was already on his way. And here I am now, like looking at the kids that won't deal with him. I'm like, I couldn't even sleep that night because I was hoping that the kids will bond again with Bill. When you go through that for 8 months with this type of case, it was just that was the thing. But there was a specific Child Protective Service female. I wish I knew her name, and she all adopted kids too, and she was the one basically like, this ain't gonna happen overnight, but this is gonna work out based on the case you told me. And she was phenomenal, like talking to us. Even we were talking to her on the phone before she came in reference to them being standoffish with us. And they're like, just leave them alone until I get there.
Right. Yeah. And Bill, describe that moment for you.
It was, very surreal. I had grown convinced that it wasn't going to happen. That the call that I would get would be, they're gone. So, and I'd expressed that to Tommy a couple of times because, when Marshal service was first involved, Detective Wright told me their normal time frame for finding and locating somebody is about 3 days. And we were long past 3 days, and and Tommy would go, "Oh, I'm doing something. I'm going somewhere." So I'm expecting that means something's going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of days later, it's like, okay, well, we need time now to let that thing like simmer a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, that's not what I was thinking.
Right.
So, so I remember, just earlier that week, I called him and I kind of gave him the pouty face and like, look, I've given up hope that you guys even know what you're doing. This, you guys are just, some kind of stereotypical, hiding behind the government show of working, quote unquote, and not actually doing anything. And so, that's kind of lambasting him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So he called me and said that they'd locate him, and it's just like, you're overwhelmed with, is this real? And he said, the CPS lady would call me back in like 15, 20 minutes. And so that was pretty cool, because she called back and said, well, when can you get here? And I said, well, my phone says about 12 hours, so probably be there in 11 and a half.
Right. Right. And so you got there, and what was the reunion like?
At first I couldn't see him. I got to their office, and they had the kids in a room down the hall. The doors were open, so I could hear their voices. Just kind of couldn't hear them clearly, but when they laugh or something, I could hear it better. And so I was just happy to hear their voices. And she said, you can't see them right now, but they are hungry. So if you want to go get them something, I said, absolutely. And so she came back, got an order to Taco Bell. So I went down the road. It was about just a few minutes, and I was ordering Taco Bell, and I thought, I'm gonna get some churros too. Maybe they'll know it's from me. Maybe they won't. So I got them lemonades that they love. So I brought it back, and I got to kind of just listen to him, kind of like, ooh, Taco Bell, haven't had this in a while or whatever. And so it just felt good. But then she came back and said, we'll let them stay in the foster system again tonight. And we'll plan on, breaking the news to them that you're here and you're taking them home tomorrow. So stayed in the hotel and came back the next day. And, my buddy, I called my best friend and told him what was going down. And he said, you're not doing this alone. And so he hopped in a car with his wife and his kids, and they followed me out there basically like I was 7 hours ahead, because I got the news at 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. And they got the news at like 8 in the morning. So they'd come out to help me bring the kids home. I just had a little Corolla. It would have been tight bringing 4 kids home in that car. And, traumatized kids too. And who knows how they're going to see you and react to you. You don't know. So they came back out, and Genevieve and Janelle had both said, because I was standing in the lobby, and they're in the room in the back again when they get the news that, you're going home with your dad today. And they came back out, and they had to close the door because the kids started like, what? And so they closed the door, and they talked behind the door, and came back out, and they said, we think Vivian and Peter are okay to go, so why don't they go home with your friend? They said Genevieve and Janelle both said that they would kill themselves if they have to go home with you. So, by rule, regulation, or by law, we need to take them to St. Vincent's mental institution to be evaluated. I said, whatever we need to do. So we get there, and they're escorted by somebody from CPS, and I follow separately. We go in. I go in a separate door on the other side, but still on the other side of the lobby, I see them. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting there and filling out the paperwork. I get them admitted, and there's this little glass pane next to me, and I can see them behind me, laughing and giggling and acting like they're going to throw their shoe at me. And I was like, that's okay. It's fine. They're safe now, and we'll get through this. And I was just tickled that they were bonded. I could see how close they were, arm in arm, and giggling and laughing and going from, they hated each other, kind of. And part of the whole beginning of this was, why does Genevieve hate me? And there was a truth to that question. Typical sibling stuff, but, there's still heartbreak there, and that was leveraged against them. But here they are, they're bonded. And, we'll make some good of that.
And then you saw them.
So they came back from their evaluations, and both were like, they're not actually going to kill themselves. They're dealing with this the way they're going to deal with this for a moment, and that we think that moment will pass. But we think you need to take precautions. So you need to put the child locks on the car, and they need to sit in the back. So fine. So we started driving, and we get on the highway, and this big ball of ice smacks my windshield and just basically not shatters it, but cracks it all the way across. And I had to be calm, because I'm trying to present a situation of, it's okay,
right?
Whatever you guys got to deal with me, you want to yell at me, whatever. Like, everything's cool. And they wouldn't talk to me for about an hour and a half. I'd say a few things, I love you, blah, blah. Then be quiet. I'd say something else. And I see them in the back seat, doing some little sign language to each other, whispering, but then it's looking back at me. I'm thinking, how am I going to react if one of them, goes for the wheel or something? But after about an hour and a half, Genevieve speaks up. I could tell, Janelle's whispering in her ear, and Genevieve's like, fine, I'm going to be the big sister, and I'm going to protect my sibling, and we're going to lay down the law with Dad. Here's how things are going to be on this ride home, and here's how life's going to be when we get back, and blah, 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 blah. If you want us to be good, this is how it's going to be. One of them was, you're not going to speed. Well, it's going to make it a longer ride home. But okay. I swear, she was a hawk on that speedometer. I hit 72 in a 70, and she's like, Dad. All right, we'll stay at 70. So here we are. We're going to be home at 4 in the morning. I got to drive through the snowy, icy mountains of West Virginia at 2 in the morning. This is beautiful. But, we talked through a lot of stuff, and I said, fine, I'll make some changes. And as you heard from her, she said, one of the first things she noticed, I'd lost weight. That's one of the things I did to cope with the loss was I just went outside when I got home from work while they were gone and just walked and for hours until it was probably weirding people out in the neighborhood. Here's this guy still at 10 o'clock at night walking laps down this mile-long road. But I think that also showed her that what I said next was I could change. These things that you wanted, okay, we're not going to have TV anymore. We're not going to, we're not going to curse anymore. No, the irony of that one.
Whoa. Let's down.
But also to help with the transition, I was working on selling the house. I let them stay 2 and 2 with 2 of my brothers. They have families of
right.
Kids around their ages, so I let them stay there, and they had swapped around a couple times, but took about a month and a half, and then I finally got a new house, and got us all moved in together. They still hadn't warmed up to me yet. They weren't living with me yet. They were still kind of grasping at the idea of okay, we might not have been abused, and we might not be immediately abused, mm-hmm. but what if there's a slip up or there's a kind of recurrence of something where
sure.
we go to something else is going to manifest. So they still weren't bought into this was going to be the happy place. But I had enough feedback from them as we looked at the house in the neighborhood that this was the right call. So,
right.
Yeah.
Wow. On September 24th, 2020, Melody cops a plea deal. And in her plea deal, she cannot have any contact with the kids for 5 years.
Correct.
And how did you feel about that?
I mean, it was a safety net, I guess. It was to keep any of the horrific reality that we previously experienced from coming back. It was sort of
Right.
like we can continue to have we can continue to regrow, if you will, and just find ourselves again, find our stride again, and restart our lives, I guess. So I don't know. It was a sense of safety, which is soon to be up. Turn, turn, turn.
Okay.
Still time.
Right. All right. And are you still laying down the law at the house?
No.
I get to speed again.
Well, the irony of that too is now I drive, and I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay.
The one thing I want to say is we did it for the kids. That was the main thing. We weren't worried about
100%.
Melody. It was all about the kids. And to see her from that night, that morning, to now, 30 years of law enforcement is because of this.
You can clap.
No.
But that was an air clap. We're on audio, and you're doing an air clap. That's a little disingenuous, to be honest with you.
I didn't want to be loud. I wanted to show my appreciation without being obnoxious. Thank you very much.
As we wrap up this story, I obviously want to first and foremost thank you, honestly, for coming on here. You were extraordinarily articulate. You were courageous to really kind of let everybody in on not only on your story, but your inner feelings. And that's a really brave thing to do. So thank you very much, first and foremost.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, this is huge. I would never have done anything like this otherwise. I would have just kept on chugging along, I guess.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to get your story out, and now people don't ever have to assume that they know anymore.
The audacity is gone now.
Yeah. Bill, thanks very much for enabling Genevieve to tell her story and for you to share, your feelings too. I mean, we didn't even get into how people that were friends and former associates were treating you once you kind of get branded with this unfounded accusation. Of course, it's on the internet, so it must be true.
Right.
But that's a devastating thing to have people, look at you differently because of an unfounded accusation. I can't even imagine.
A manufactured accusation.
Yeah,
Yes.
completely. So
Right.
thank you for coming in and sharing your feelings.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's good to be able to express ourselves, and the whole point of this is to educate other people that may be thinking of going through this or are affected in some way, that help put an end to that and understand that there's a lot of victims that can come from this, and to be sure you're living in the truth and doing the right things, not just doing it out of emotion or such, because it can hurt people.
And Jim, thank you very much for being on and for your advocacy work. You helped on this case. Obviously, from what Mr. O'Brien tells me, you've been doing it quite a bit. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everyone too. Genevieve, definitely first and foremost. I second everything that Chris said. You're absolutely incredible, and I'm so sorry that you and your siblings had to go through what you went through. And we're fighting hard out here. That Tom is. I hate to admit this in front of other people, but Tom is one of my heroes. And it was very clear from the very beginning that this is not just a job for him. And he told me probably 100 times at least, he said, this case is very personal to me. And he said, I will do everything within my power to bring these kids home safe to their dad. And Tom, that meant the world to me, and still does.
And I want to thank Jamie Wright from the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. Thanks for being here, Jamie.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Like I said, I'm all about this. I wanted to do this part for Bill and his kids, specifically because, I feel like this is the time for them to get their side of the story out. So I was all about being supportive for that, and I want to be here for that.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks. And Senior Inspector from the U.S. Marshal Service, Tommy O'Brien, who has sent Vegas into a tailspin. His associates and all of the casinos taking book on this said there was not a chance that this man was going to be able to tell a clear, concise story. You have done so, sir. You have shocked the world, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim?
I was laughing at something else that's in the room.
And if you have a moment, this is the part I ask you to please go to Apple or Spotify and give us a 5-star rating and write a glowing review. And, of course, tell your friends about us. It's pretty unusual to have a podcast where you're hearing from the people in law enforcement who are at the tip of the spear. We're just trying to grow this thing so we could really use your help. So thanks very much in advance. And finally, Chasing Evil is produced with the cooperation of the U.S. Marshals Service. It contains interviews with current and retired employees as well as other persons. Opinions, positions, and views expressed by any of them may not reflect the official views, positions, or policies of the United States Marshals Service. Stay safe, everyone.